Welcome to tonight's program, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about some current events. In particular, we're going to be talking about the immigration issue that is occurring right now on our southern border, and we're going to try to get this out as soon as possible. But this is something that's right up our alley, and it deals with a humanitarian issue that's manifesting itself, and how people are just it's kinds of things are being done at the expense of these young people who are coming from desperate situations to the promised land, and all of a sudden it looks like we've lost our bearings, that we really don't stand for what the Statue of Liberty calls for. We don't stand for taking care of other human beings. We really are a nation of haters. There are people getting killed all over the Middle East, and we're sending them billions and billions of dollars for refugee relief. And while we have no business over there other than the value of the oil, the almighty oil. And we're willing to sacrifice blood and treasure for that. And we have an immigration system here in America that is very complex, and yet it seems that we have such a short memory that we're willing to forget about the fact that we have a broken system and focus in almost exclusively on these young people coming over the border. And so the haters, they're taking advantage of it and trying to politicize it by making it out to be Obama's failure and to do anything on immigration, when we know for a fact that it's the Congress that's refusing to take action on this issue. We also know that the media is taking this issue and focusing it, and it's creating energy, dissent on the part of some members of society, American society, that don't want these people here, that they're bringing in quote-unquote diseases, gang members. They're just politicizing and making this a hateful issue, when in fact, in the reality is that this thing that's happening or occurring on the border today is just a really small component of the greater issue. I mean, it almost deals exclusively with the globalization that's now taking hold of the whole world, and where we have to depend a lot on cheap labor as part of that third world globalization that we're all part of now. When we see the middle class dying, when we see wages stagnant, and we have to rely on as a capitalistic system for cheap labor to make that system operate, then you're going to have what's happening now is an influx of cheap labor, uh, people willing to, where $7 an hour is a big thing. Uh, so you have to put it in proper perspective, and that is, what kind of life do I have, or does an individual have, that would make $7 an hour attractive? And it's the reality that people live in these societies that are right next door, in conditions that are worse than we could probably imagine. And that $7 an hour, it's as good as being $700 an hour to some of these individuals, and they're willing to risk their life and what have you to come to the promised land. We are a land of immigrants, but like I said before, you got to be the right color in order to be the right immigrant that they'll accept here. But I want to say something with respect to the hegemony. I always get back to the hegemony and the fact that we have a racist society, and that's, you can see that on full view as what I see on the television these days, where you have people from Murrieta, California, coming out and protesting against these busloads of refugees coming from Central America, and telling them to go back to El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. And all of a sudden, the immigration issue it becomes a Central American issue, no longer a Mexican issue. They somehow want to take the emphasis out of that. But the thing that really kind of frosts me, as they say, is the fact that it's brown on brown. A lot of those people who are protesting these buses and the arrival of these children are Mexicans or of Mexican descent. Americans of Mexican descent who are second and third generations, and that's because they've been through a racist system that actually makes them self-haters. And so anything, if you're a self-hater, that means that you're going to hate anything that reflects upon you. And if these individuals are coming over and they look like you, but they have all of this racist baggage, the stereotypical baggage that they're carrying with them, you're gonna because you live next door and you work so hard to be accepted by your white neighbor, you can't really survive in this society if you show your neighbor any kind of humanity towards these people that they have learned to hate. You're not going to be well accepted in your community, and so you go right along with them. You not only go along with them, you give them a ride to the rally, and you stand there holding hands with these racists and telling these other brown people to go back where they came from. That's a sickness. It's part of our society, and that's what I've got to tell politicians. And that is the Latinization, the Latinos, is such a complex issue. The issue of immigration is so complex that you try to paint it with one big broad brush under this thing called Latino, that it hurts even when you're trying to do something honestly, when you're trying to address an issue on its merits, because you've already poisoned the water so much, and you've created this impression of people that it's going to take. You have to brainwash them back to a different level of understanding in order for them to behave. This thing's going to get out of control if we're not careful. And what I'm saying is that on the immigration issue, we know that let's say there's 12 million and I've said this before, undocumented people in the United States. Well, 60% of those 12 million came over vis-a-vis the southern border or the northern border, whatever. But 40% are people who were here legally and just overstayed their visas. And so, if you're smart, you have an ounce of integrity or brain in you, you understand that 40% of 12 million is a lot of people, and that immigration is a complex issue. It involves 12 million people, and there are different aspects, different ethnic groups, different reasons for people being here undocumented. And until we fix that program, that process, those laws, we're always going to have what we have now. And that is, we have 12 million people who exist in our midst, and nobody does anything about it. On the other hand, you have the what I call the acculturation or the brainwashing of people of color like myself, who don't fit into the America's dominant society, or what it pictures as Native American. They always say Native Americans. They say white people are Native Americans, and everybody else is minority or comes from some other place. And so a person like me, who's a third generation American of Mexican descent, we think, we act like as if we're Americans, just pure Americans. And so when we see another quote unquote minority looking person, that's not us. It's not us. We're white. We've been brainwashed, but we know deep down in our hearts, we know within ourselves that that person with the mustache and black hair looks sort of native, is poor, comes from the southern hemisphere, and everything that's been said about them is ugly and stereotypically racist. We don't want to be associated with them, but yet, and you know it yourself, that in today's society, I remember when I was in the hospital, I spent a lot of time in the hospital here in 2010. It never ceased to amaze me how many doctors would ask me what part of Mexico I came from. How many nurses would ask me. And some of them were real sensitive, and they kind of led. And then when they found out that I spoke Spanish, they were just, it was like culture shock to them. I was really something. Here's a person that's educated, speaks perfect English, or at least I think I speak perfect English, and yet he's bilingual. He's a strange person. But in a way, he's kind of talented. Well, a lot of people like me, not like they care for me, who are similar to me, we are self-haters. And we look at the immigration issue as their problem, not our problem. That the way society portrays these young kids coming from Central America is the way that I look at them, as being invaders, as being intruders, never knowing that the guy who's sitting next to me, he thinks just by looking at me that I must be a foreigner. See? And that's reality. But yet we vote. You think that, and I'm going to use my own family as an example here. There are no more purebloods in my family, my immediate family. My wife and I have 8 children between us. We have 8 grandkids and 4 great grandbabies. And not one of them chose to marry another Mexican. Excuse me, American of Mexican descent. And so if you see my babies, if you see our offsprings, they're beginning to look more and more like things that you would accept. Except they have the last name, but they know nothing about their Mexican culture per se. And so they, while they're counted in the what would I say, the census as being minorities, they don't see themselves minorities, and their voting is strictly based a lot of times on merit and not on party. And so it is important for the parties then to educate themselves and understand that there's a certain strata of the voting people, the people who vote, that is a lot different than this immigration strata. The one that are recently retired, or first generation immigrants who have as a priority the issue of immigration. So, if you believe that the immigration is the only issue that's going to draw to you people of color, you're wrong. And both parties are wrong, Democrat and the Republican. You know why? Because you're ignorant. You're ignorant of the realities associated with the demographics. And until you understand the differences, until you can engage the issues that are going on in the border, along the border right now, you do not have credible leadership. And I mean in terms of political leadership that's going to be able to deal with this issue in an issue that has merit, because there are legal issues associated with this issue. There are political issues that are associated with these young people, and there's economic issues. And the economic issue is what I talked about, the globalization. The political issue is how both sides, one side's trying to demonize and play off of people like me who have been brainwashed into thinking that anything brown is suspicious and you should be afraid of them, and they're full of disease and they're downtrodden and they're going to bring down society. And then you have the law that says we should treat immigrants this way. This is the process. But the law is broken. And we don't have any contingency plans per se. And everybody is not talking about the law. There is a law that deals with individuals like the children coming across the border who find themselves here. And there is a process that mandates by law what is supposed to happen to these children. But then you have these politicians who are just, and the media who's looking at the energy, all of the confrontations that are going on, and not doing anything about helping people. And that's dangerous. I've always said that we're on the precipice of a revolution. And I've always said that revolutions, in my opinion, as I looked at the 60s and 70s, they all started with little sporadic, a flare up here, a flare up there. We never got to the place where it was army versus army, although some marches did manifest themselves that way. But a lot of people were hurt. And the only difference now is that we have a brown demographic, a colored demographic that cannot be changed. And the sooner we deal with that, the sooner we educate and inform ourselves about that issue, we'll be able to address these problems that manifest themselves because we have a broken immigration system. And I would call on each and every one of you to educate yourself, to make yourself familiar and understand exactly what your responsibilities are as a society, what your rights are, and how you should hold these people accountable. Gotta go out and
some call it the beast. To others, it's the train of death. But to all these illegal migrants, it's a free ride bound for their American dream of washing dishes, picking lettuce, or carrying bricks.
We work under the sun and all that thing over there. No, if you're born over there, your life is gonna be different. You're gonna work in the office, go to a nice high school, go to a nice college, you know. But I don't think we're stealing their money or their jobs, you know.
Like Elvin, most aboard are from Central American countries like Guatemala and Honduras. They'll spend days clinging to cargo trains as they grind through southern Mexico up toward the US border. Human rights groups estimate thousands have died falling from trains like this, some of them mutilated under its wheels. En route to the US border, many more have been robbed, raped and kidnapped. The Mexican authorities do little to prevent them riding or to deter gangs from preying on them. So when I caught up with this group of migrants at a free hostel in southern Mexico, I wondered why they were ready to sacrifice so much.
The American dream is a really American dream, because you can make money and live better. Help your people over here.
Elvin once worked in the US before being jailed on a drug and drunk driving charge and later deported.
And I want to do the things right this time, and I don't want to get in trouble again. Yeah, we're trying to. I don't think I'm a bad person. I just like to drink sometimes, make mistakes like every single person in the world, you know.
A card game to kill the hours before the train pulls out. Antonio has also lived in the States. In the US, he can earn more in a day than in a whole week back home. He proudly tells me he was Employee of the Year at an Applebee's restaurant in Michigan.
They put up a plaque in the lobby. There was only one Hispanic name up there, and it was mine.
Greville from Honduras is a first-timer. He's traveling alone, but makes new friends with witty raps about his tough upbringing.
I've heard people saying nice things about America, like it's another world. So I want to see for myself and try my luck.
By next morning, hope has become apprehension as they wait by the tracks. Some smoke a marijuana joint to calm their nerves. Elvin's stony-faced, and Greville has just seen the beast for the first time.
Estoy asustado por la agarrada del tren, güey.
He says he's frightened to jump on the train. I scramble onto the train. I tie myself on for safety. I got off at an unscheduled stop a few hours later, but I heard the train arrived without incident in the town of Ixtepec. It's been a tough 12-hour ride to get here, but the migrant still faces many more days of travel to get to the US border. A few nights later, another group of migrants who boarded the train of death were not so lucky. The train pulled out around midnight. When I caught up with it at first light, there was clearly something wrong. Only a handful of people were still aboard. As they straggled into this migrant hostel in Ixtepec, they claimed about 60 federal police and a heavily armed civilian gang had held up the train.
They began pulling people off the train and they fired 2 shots. We ran to escape, but they grabbed a lot of people.
The migrants believe as many as 100 of their fellow travelers were kidnapped, including this man's sister.
Lo que pensé, que hasta ahí habíamos llegado, pues era el final ya.
I thought this is as far as I go. I thought that this was the end. I was thinking about how to escape because I didn't know whether they were police or kidnappers.
As they rest after their scare, we check what might have happened. The Immigration Department of Federal Police said there had been no official operation or arrests. A week later, hostel workers told me the detained migrants had been robbed but were freed after human rights workers lodged formal complaints. Fernando Batista, a senior government human rights official, was visiting the hostel. He says corrupt Mexican authorities frequently conspire with kidnapping gangs.
Todas y todos los migrantes se encuentran en una situación extrema de vulnerabilidad.
The migrants are extremely vulnerable, and there are cases where federal and local authorities, far from doing their job of preventing crime, are colluding with those people committing those crimes.
Father Alejandro Solalinde has been giving migrants a free meal and a bed at this hostel for the last 5 years. Bitter experience tells him they will press on despite the risks, rather than go home to poverty.
Yo observo a los migrantes, ese éxodo interminable.
This is an interminable exodus. It never ends. But I'm sure they're going to make history. They're going to rebuild America.
But before they make that history or achieve their own more modest dreams, these poor migrants must first survive the train of death. Carl Penhall, CNN, in southern Mexico.